Welcome to Instruction Discussion, our weekly look at the latest topics and trends in education affecting schools here on Long Island and schools around the world. Whether you're a teacher, parent, or student, listen for tips and strategies to help you navigate the educational landscape. There's a bell. It's time to start today's Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boston Hill, and welcome to Instruction Discussion, where each week we will examine a recent trend or development in education and its impact on Long Island. Mention the term special education or even IEP, and you get a mixed bag of emotional responses. From, it's a necessity to help those who need it to compete with other students, to a classification that stigmatizes those who are involved, not to mention the disproportionate numbers of males of color who are referred to special education. We won't deal with the latter issue today, but instead focus on special education in general and the IEP in particular, how it provides a much needed support for students who struggle academically due to some disability. Arguably, with the targeted use of the IEP, it may be possible to reduce the negative perception of special education. But to do so requires the voice and input of one key member of that IEP meeting, the student. Research suggests that while about 80% of students K-12 attend their individualized education program meetings, only about 12.2% offered significant input or took a leadership role in the meetings. Because of their minimal input, students often do not know why they are in the meetings, what the IEP is for, or what is expected of them. A consequence of this is students in special education are less likely to be employed and or enrolled in higher education after graduation. And the stigma continues. How can we increase student participation in IEP meetings and perhaps reduce the stigma associated with them? Our next guest may have the answer. Angie Chapple is an educational consultant at a regional support office in Ohio and provides coaching, technical support, and professional development to educators and their families. Her recent article, How to Foster Student Self-Advocacy in IEP Meetings, offers a blueprint to make the IEP meeting more effective and productive for everyone, especially the one who benefits the most from it, the student. Let's welcome Angie Chapple to Instruction Discussion on 90.3 WHPC.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome.
Hi.
Once again, welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know, special education, individualized educational programs, all those things. It kind of strikes a nerve with some people, but it's but because it's that area that is very much needed. But in a lot of cases, unless you're really immersed in it, very little is understood about what actually takes place in those special education meetings. So I'm glad that you're able to be here to help clarify some of those things and, again, to reduce a lot of the stigma that's associated with being in special education and having an IEP.
Sure, right. Special education becomes like this island in schools, right? It's very separate. It's down the hall. It's that special magical place that, we send kids to, and we don't even know what happens when they go there, right? Little do we even know what happens for the planning or how we're deciding what programming or what's being put into place for kids. And then do the kids even know what's being put into place for them? Are they asked? Are they a member? Are they a part of the team? And like you said, kids get invited to their meetings, but they often don't speak. They don't know what to say. Oftentimes, kids don't even know why they're having the meeting. Many kids don't know they have an IEP. So, they get into the meeting and we're talking about having an IEP meeting and they're like, what's an IEP? We'll say, well, because you have a disability. And they'll say, well, I don't have a disability. And it's one of those things that it has become so stigmatized that we even want to, like, quote unquote, protect the kids from them knowing they have a disability. And it really does them a disservice because, it's a natural part of life, right? Disability exists. 12% of the population are individuals with disabilities. Probably when you think about aging and moving on, even more when you think about how folks, as we get older, we develop different disabilities. But when we're talking school age, it's like 12, 13% of our population is kids with disabilities. And it's like I said, it's a natural part of existence. And we should treat it as such, not as something to look down on, not as a negative, not as something bad, but something that is just part of who we are. And how are we going to address it?
No, I think you're absolutely right about that, because as you were speaking, when you started your response, I was immediately thinking of when I was in school. It was the special education students were kind of not even just down the hall. They were like in the basement someplace they had almost like their own entrance into the building, so that you didn't know who was in there, when they were there, what their hours were, or anything like that. And it was just that place you didn't want to be. because there was so little known about it. But I think the laws over the years have really strengthened to try to remove some of that stigma away, to make sure that those classes are now more visible, so that now everybody understands where they are, what they're for. And I think now we're doing a lot more least responsive or least restrictive environments for students, so that they're more ingrained in the curriculum. But let me ask you, and if you can answer this question for me as well, what is at least in Ohio, what does the law say about inviting students? Is it a mandate that students are invited to those meetings? And if not, and is that something that is state by state, or is that like a more of a national type of requirement? Right.
Yeah. So nationally, federally, the federal law IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, says that when beginning at 16, students must be invited to their IEP meeting. That's part of transition planning. Now, different states have different rules around that. So 16 is the high end. Some states start at 14, some at 12. Ohio starts at 14. The majority of states start, around 14. But they have to be by 16. And like I said, there's a handful that start even sooner than 14 inviting. Now they have to invite. That doesn't mean the child has to attend, but it is mandated that they must be invited. Okay, so beginning at age 16, 14 for many states, even younger for some.
Now, is that the mandate of inviting that we're just talking about, is that just for the transitional meetings, or is that just overall as soon as they are actually issued that IEP?
Yeah, it is any child, starting at age 16. 16 is also when transition planning is mandated to start. Okay, so transition planning could start sooner or not, but that is the age. But it is for the entire meeting. It's not just for the transition planning. It is intended to be, they are invited to their IEP team meeting. Transition planning is one part of that IEP team meeting.
And the reason I asked for that clarification is because I know that a lot of students receive an IEP much earlier than 16. So they may be 8 or 9 with an IEP, and are those students required to be invited to their own IEP meetings?
Right. They are not required. They are a recommended member. Okay. Because at that point, children are younger, so there's not a requirement, but it's always recommended. So if you look at the list of people, the required members, it'll tell you who they are. Your general educator, your special educator, your parent, your administrator, and then it has others, other recommended folks where you're going to see the student related services, and other adults that are pertinent to the team meeting. Unfortunately, it's not a requirement. I wish it was, but it's not. But it is a recommendation.
But to me, it just seems that common sense would, we're making all of these decisions for the benefit of the student. Why not have the student present?
Yes. Totally agree with you. There's this phrase, nothing about me without me. And I love that phrase because we're making these plans. We have a bunch of grown-ups with all the best intentions. Please don't get me wrong. I would never believe that there is anyone who got into education to harm children. We are here to help children. Right? We are here to make things better, to do the best we can to help kids to be successful, right? But this is group of grown-ups that get together and make decisions. And we make a lot of assumptions when we make those decisions. And if we're not asking the children for sure, what is it that helps you? What is it that you're good at? What is it that you're not good at? What is it, we don't have to use the language, but what accommodations do you need? How do we know, right? We're making a lot of assumptions. We can base it on data. We could base it on research, but the best place to base it is on the child. Okay, so let's ask the kids, what is it? How do you learn best? Do you learn better in a group? Do you learn better with your friends? Do you learn better in a quiet place? We give these accommodations of extra time or one-on-one instruction, right? And we have kids who are super social and maybe they want to be in a group, and one-on-one instruction is super intimidating. So that's not helpful, but we assume that's going to help. Or extended time. Maybe if I have more time, I get distracted. Ask me, what do I need? Do I need more time or do I not? So just start asking kids.
No, I think you're absolutely right with that, because as adults, yes, and as you mentioned, we have the best of intentions when we're coming up with these plans. But when I was sitting in meetings, and I was a special ed supervisor for a long time, but when I was sitting in these meetings and we would ask the questions on what accommodations to provide or what settings are we should put the student in, the question would always be centered on, well, let's ask the homeroom teacher or let's ask the related service provider. And oftentimes, depending on the question, they would kind of sit dumbfounded, because now you're asking them to, especially when it comes to that of the content area teacher, to remember one specific child out of 30 in one class, or even now you're talking about maybe even 90 if they have a block of classes. So it's hard for them to really, if they didn't bring all of their data, and unfortunately, how good are the notes that people take on students, again, just because of the wide number of students that they have. So to ask the adults in the room about a student who isn't there, it can be problematic. Because then when we get the IEP figured out and filled out and everything, we give it off to the parent, who again expects us, the school people, to be the experts. So they're going to sign off on it thinking, well, you know what's best. And right. When all this is done, no one has asked the student, well, like you said, what is it that you need? What is it that you would like to have? And things of that. And so we really don't know. We're kind of just making broad-based assumptions that may or may not work.
Right. I mean, and sometimes we make assumptions, again, with the best of intentions.
Yes.
But they're not helpful to the child, or the child really doesn't want them. I could, like, for example, I go to a lot of different schools, around my area. It's part of what I do. And I'll often ask folks, how are they tracking the provision of accommodations or providing the specially designed instruction? How are they keeping track of that? How do they know if it's working? And so many times I'll have folks say to me that, well, we try to provide the accommodations, but he doesn't want them. He refuses his accommodations. And it's like, well, have you asked him if he wants them? Well, he doesn't, and it's like, and if he's being successful without them, he probably doesn't need it.
Right.
But if he's not being successful without the accommodations, it's probably not the right accommodation. Mm-hmm. Right. So let's talk to the student. Let's talk to that kid and say, if you don't want this, what else do you need? What is it that you think you need to be successful? Let's talk about that, right? But then also putting parameters on it, right? Because as soon as you start asking kids, what do you want? Oh, I want everything. No, you can't have everything.
Can't have everything.
Or you can't have nothing. So let's talk about what is reasonable. What is it that, maybe offering choices. Here are some things to pick from. Which one do you think is going to be the best one for you? Let's try it. Let's agree to try it for so many weeks. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else, right? But bringing the kids in to have that conversation about the choice of what do you think it is that you need to help you? We do that ourselves as regular folks every day. We decide what's going to be best for us. Let's allow some kids to make some of those decisions too.
You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is Ohio educational consultant Angie Chapple. Now, let me ask you, because we know that it is important to note that student involvement will vary based on a number of factors. So how can we encourage or differentiate the type and level of involvement that students will experience in those IEP meetings, and let them know that it's okay if you don't want to speak up at this meeting, but it's okay no matter what level of development they have.
Mhm. Right. So there's a lot of factors that you have to take into consideration when we're talking about students with disabilities. Because when you say disability, it's a wide range of need. It's a wide range of ability. It's a wide range of scaffolds and accommodations that we may need to put in place. Then we also have to consider age, right? Mm-hmm. So kindergartners are going to do things much differently than high schoolers. Kids that have, more significant disabilities or maybe communication disabilities are going to be able to participate in a different way than those who are very verbal, right? So you have to take all of those things into consideration. But even starting at a very young age, just asking kids, is there anyone else you want to invite to the meeting? Here's who we're inviting. Is there someone else that knows you really well that could help us to figure out what we can do best for you? Maybe asking them who else they want to come, asking younger children to create the invitations, right? Make an invitation for whoever you want to come, send those invitations out. They're taking that active role then and doing something as part of the meeting. Older kids could create an agenda. They could run parts of the meeting. Ideally, it would be great to get kids to be able to run the whole meeting. Say, here's who I am, and this is what I need. The IEP really becomes the EP. It's mine. This is individualized. This is about me. Even kids who are struggle with communication, asking them to, do some visuals, create a PowerPoint, show me some pictures, right? Kids love their pictures, their phones, got my smartphone, here's some things that I've done. Look, I took this trip and I did this, and they're showing you their smartphone with their pictures. Helps you to know who they are. Just being able to, to get to know who the individual is before you start having the meeting, and just having them to be able to voice who they are, what they like, what they don't like, what they're good at, what they need help with, how best they learn. Any of those sorts of things could be a way for kids to be more involved in their meetings.
It sounds like as you talk and start mentioning all these different scaffolds and ways to differentiate, it sounds like those are very similar strategies, if not the exact same ones we use in our everyday instruction anyway. So Why not just use those when we're talking about something as specialized as an IEP meeting? Because it's a special meeting doesn't mean we have to come up with a whole new list of special things to match it.
Right. And what better way to practice those skills that you've been teaching in the classroom and that you've been modeling for children as you're instructing them, than for them to now show you how they've learned that, right? They can now demonstrate to you. So now you have a nice performance-based assessment to see how well they are able to take those skills and, transfer them into something practical, something everyday.
And we talk about those everyday skills. And one of the biggest everyday skill that even able-bodied people, for lack of a better term, students have a difficulty grasping is goal setting. So how do we teach students with disabilities about how they can actually go through goal setting? Yeah.
So, again, this is going to a wide variety, a wide range, depending on age and, the ability levels and so on. But sometimes it's just like for younger kids, it's about making choices. This is where you are. This is where you need to be. Which way do you want to go? Which thing do you want to try? Offering choice to kids. For older kids, working with them on a profile, helping them to understand themselves and what they know about themselves. What are they good at? What are they not so good at? You could have kids there's all sorts of different, aptitude assessments and things out there if kids are unsure. Again, it's about the choice, right? Offering choice, but helping them to know what it is that they are good at, what it is that they want to be able to do, what are their interests. We always talk in transition planning about preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. Okay, that's a big part of that. So what are your preferences? How do you like to go about doing things? Do you like small group, big group, whatever, right? Interests, what do you like? What are your needs? What are your strengths? If you can come up with those things for all kids, it's easy to write goals, and it's easy to help them to understand how to write a goal. It gives you the condition for how you want to do it, your preference. It gives you the interest, what I want to accomplish. the need, what I need to have help with, and the strength, what I already have that I have going on that I can build from. And that's what goal setting is all about.
Right. And then when you couch all of that and start using the language of a SMART goal, as far as, again, that is specific, measurable, and so forth, now the students are actually, that's a skill now that they can apply no matter where they go, whether they continue on in education or with their workplace of environment, wherever they are. They have now a skill that, again, like I said, it's hard for a lot of people to grasp at some points.
Right.
So how do we also encourage a solutions-based mindset in students? That's something that's difficult to ingrain in adults. So how do we get that to the students to actually embrace a solutions-based mindset? And why is it important to teach that?
Well, okay. So when I think about this, the solutions-based mindset, it's like you being able to come up, solve the problem, right? This is what's going on, and I need to be able to reach an end goal. But we also have to know that things aren't always cut and dry, right? It's here's where I am, here's where I want to be. I see this nice little trajectory of how I want to get there, but it rarely does that happen, right? So you have to be able to help kids to understand that there's going to be bumps in the road along the way. Okay, and that's for everything, no matter what. It's very rare that we say, I'm going to go from here to here in this amount of time, and it exactly happens, right? So it's about don't give up, right? You don't want to give up on that. So helping kids to understand that failure is an option, right? It happens sometimes, and we have to learn from that. So if we don't necessarily stay on target for our goal, what are we going to do? Not give up, not stop. We have to adjust. We have to do things differently. We have to understand that. We have to learn from those mistakes. So allowing kids to have the option to potentially not do well, that's okay. That's one of the things in special education that and having been a special educator for over 30 years, it's like, I wish this one would go away. It is okay for kids to not succeed every time you offer them something. It's okay. They can learn from the mistake. It's what we do. It's life. That's how we get through life. So allowing that to happen, even building that into goals, building that into your classroom work, offering kids the option to be able to not do something and find out the consequence. Right? Yeah. I mean, that usually what happens is if kids say they're not going to do something, we start coaxing and coercing, and we find all these ways and we put plans in place and this and that and the other, rather than just say, okay.
Right.
What's going to happen if you don't do it? What's going to happen if you choose not to? Giving the kids the opt out. Okay.
Right.
So now you've opted out of that. What's plan B?
Exactly. Now you opted out. What are the consequences of that opting out? But then you allow them to give them the option to opt back in when they see what those consequences are. Yeah.
Correct. And that's, like I said, that's like, we're still staying on the same path. We're still goal setting. We're still moving, but we're still heading towards that solution. But we have to know that, we have to be ready for those things that are going to get in our way on the way to that solution, and building it into instructional time throughout the day.
Now, the article that we're referring to, it was in Edutopia not too long ago. And part of one of the research studies that you highlight in the article is adolescent transition education for youth with disabilities by Carrie Sjogren and Michael Waymeyer. Can you talk a little bit about what the crux of that research is, and I guess what the strategies that they're talking about, and why don't we use them throughout the entire process, and not just in transition?
Right. Well, to answer your last question, good question. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, transition planning should be starting when kids are 2. Why not? Why should we wait until kids are 16 to start talking about what are you going to do when you leave school in 2 years, right? So to answer that question, starting with that one, I don't know. I agree. We should be starting this stuff way sooner. But as far as the research goes, there are, there are several different studies that have happened over time, many longitudinal studies that kind of feed into this research that, there are certain predictors and practices that if we start to engage with these predictors and these practices, they are predictors of post-school success. So things like, big one, just inclusion in general education classrooms, right? being with your peers, being in integrated, inclusive settings, because that's life. There is no special ed movie theater.
Right.
Right. So why do we do that to kids in school? Right. So that's one of those predictors. It's like kids need to be with their peers. We need to have everybody together. Things like, work-based learning. That's another one when kids get a little older, or even like into middle school. Give kids tasks and jobs, right? They need to be able to see what it means, to know what workplace etiquette is, to know how to communicate those quote unquote soft skills, right? And if you ask employers these days, what is it that kids are lacking the most or that individuals are lacking the most when you're looking for that prime candidate, they'll tell you it's soft skills.
Yeah.
They have a lot of people that have all those technical skills, but it's the soft skills. They don't know how to ask questions. They don't know how to tell you what to do when they're done with the task. They don't know how to ask for more work, those sorts of things. So those are those predictors. And like I said, over these studies, over time, they've been able to come up with these lists of these predictors and practices for success. And many of them are built into transition planning. Like you said, why don't we start these sooner? Yeah, we should. We absolutely should start them sooner.
So if you had to, I guess, leave our audience with one final thought about the importance and impact of having students taking more of a major role in their own IEP meetings, what would that thought be?
That thought would be, school is a protected place, right? We have a lot of grown-ups that are around children, helping them to be able to navigate everything. But that's not going to be the case forever. And if we don't teach kids how to navigate and figure things out and advocate for themselves and speak up at whatever level they can or however they can, that's where learned helplessness comes in. And we'll have folks that aren't going to be able to say, no, don't do that, or yes, I need this. And that, it's not going to lead to success for folks. So, we have to remember that school is a tiny portion of these folks' lives. We have to prepare them for the next 50 years. Okay. We have them for 13 years. We got to prepare them. We have 18 years of best, whatever we have, but we got to prepare them for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So.
You figure you have them for that, I guess, that K to 16 continuum if you add on the 4 years of college as well. And yeah, like I said, once they're done, they're 22 when we're finished with them. So what do they do now for the next 50 years after that? Right. And so they don't have the necessarily the accommodations that we've given them in the years prior. So how are they going to navigate the world without those accommodations and so forth? Right.
And you said it, that we've given them. Yes. We have to help kids to be able to ask for them. Right? Because no one's going to be giving them to them when they leave school.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Well, we would certainly like to thank our guest, Ohio educational consultant and author of the Edutopia article, How to Foster Student Self-Advocacy in IEP Meetings, Angie Chapple, for coming on to our show today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for allowing me to share my insights.
And once again, my name is Kevin Boston Hill, and thank you all for listening to Instruction Discussion, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.